Hey, what is going on, guys? This is CodedSteele, and I would like to welcome you guys to a new series on Autodesk123D design. So, as usual, I try to make things as easy on you guys as I possibly can. So, I've already added the link on my channel page. If you go to CodedSteele's channel page and you go down here, you see this link for 123D design. So you can click on that, and it will take you to the 123D app homepage, and you've got PC download, Mac download, iPad download. Choose the appropriate one for you. I have a PC, so I did the PC download, and I already have the object or item installed on my computer. Or the software, I'm sorry, I was installed on my computer. So if you have a Mac, you can click the Mac option, or if you want to follow along on an iPad, have at it. As you guys can see from this little window, there is a lot of stuff you can do with this program. It is freeware. You can download it and you can use it free of charge. And there is a lot of stuff that you can do with this. It can help you. You can do things from as far as 3D printing objects, or you can even create something just to help you visualize what an item or an object or whatever would look like when you're done. So maybe you're designing some kind of, I don't know, a desk or something for your room. And maybe this would be able to help you visualize and give you dimensions of pieces before you turn around and buy the material to build it. So you can use it for that, or you could also 3D print from it, and it also has that capability. And we'll get into that stuff later. So after you click the link, you go through the blah-bitty blah of downloading everything and installing it. You're going to have a little icon on your desktop for 123D design. So if we double click that, it'll launch Autodesk123D. And as soon as that comes up, we should be in some pretty good shape here. Alright, and then we'll just click Start a New Project. So when it opens up, it gives you a nice little kind of, I don't know, it just shows you a grid, whatever else, and then there's a bunch of icons everywhere that maybe we don't know what they do. So let's start going through just the basics of this stuff to try to figure out what everything does, and that way we can actually get into modeling and how we can actually use some of these functions to be capable of doing things. So right here you've got the I guess the transform drop down, and that has a bunch of things such as maybe moving, rotating, aligning, scaling, and whatever else. So we'll kind of go through these functions after I kind of show you guys. Primitives, these are all the different shapes that you can turn around and drop in and whatever else. So if I drop a box in and I go back under the transform tab, I can click on this box and I can, move it around or do whatever I need to do to, get it where I need to get it. But it was fine the way it was. That was just kind of trying to show you guys. Another thing I can do is I can align objects. So that comes in handy if I have this type of a situation going on. Let's say I've got another cube and I need that cube to be aligned with this cube. Well, I can align the objects by clicking on them, and then I can bring them together so their faces of the solids are facing each other. So you can do that in a bunch of, I could do that in a bunch of different ways to just turn around aligning it. If I wanted to, okay, that failed. Align, click. Okay, oh, there we go. Maybe I needed to click on both of them ahead of time. There we go. Well, this will just move them. Not bad. I wanted to align. There we go. So you guys kind of see this will align them both there, and you can even hover over it to show you how it will align them before you actually turn around and move stuff around. But basically the whole purpose of this is it's hard sometimes to get faces to line up, and you can sit here and you can try to drag them around and get them to line up and whatever, but that's not always easy. So having the ability to just turn around and line them up like that is just it's a good thing to use. This will help you if you've got something below the surface, and then you can level it, use another shape to bring it back up and get it where you need it to be. But enough of that. That's the align command. Then there's the scale command. Scaling comes in handy if I need to change the size of the object. So let's say, for example, I need to change its X and Y dimensions, like I was doing right there. I can click it on the corner, or I can just click it here, drag it that way, or I click it here, drag it this way, or I can click it here, make it taller, you know, all that good stuff. So I'll get it back to the shape it was. So that's scaling, and that's the smart scaling. Actually, scaling, if I click on this, scaling is a pretty standard thing. It doesn't have that type of, it doesn't have the same, you know, as the smart scaling does. You got uniform and you got non-uniform scaling. Uniform obviously meaning that if I scale this down or up by 2, it's going to double the size of the cube. And that is just because it's going to stretch it in both the X, the Y, and the Z dimension. So you're gaining a lot more area, or a lot more volume to the cube. You're essentially doubling the volume of the cube. Then you got non-uniform. Non-uniform obviously meaning you can scale it which direction you want to go. You want to make it bigger in the X, and, you know, I don't know, smaller in the Y, and then maybe even smaller in the Z. Now I've got a little, you know, tiny, almost a two-dimensional object now because I've pretty much squashed it in the Z direction. But that's everything that you can do with the scaling options. Then you've got the ruler to be able to measure distances, smart rotating. I don't really use that one too much. Shapes we already covered, rectangles, objects, and on such, you know, on. A lot of these other functions we'll get into in later videos, and I'll show you guys how to use them, but we're going to cover everything. This is just going to be kind of an intro. So these are obviously 3D shapes. These are 2D shapes. So this will be X and Y dimensions, no Z. And sometimes it's better to start this way because once you add a third dimension to something, it can be a lot harder to manipulate. At least for me. Maybe it's not for some of you guys that are watching this. But I always like to start out in 2D. Very rarely will I take a three-dimensional shape and place it in a drawing. Only if I feel like, you know, it's easily manipulatable, or maybe it's the only way to be able to, maybe I need to draw on the face of the object to be able to, you know, manipulate it in a specific way. We'll go into further details about why that might be useful in the future, or, you know, why it might be better to use a three-dimensional shape as opposed to two-dimensional, you know, rectangle or whatever. So obviously, since this is two-dimensional, we need to have a way to get it into 3 dimensions. So if I turned around and I say, for example, I'll introduce a new command here, offset. Maybe I want to offset this shape and bring it out, you know, 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Well, now I have to be able to find a way to extrude this thing into 3 dimensions. Well, the way we can do that is under Construct tab, there's something called Extrude. And you can extrude your shape all the way up. Another thing that's important to mention, you guys see there, the only thing that extruded was this part of the shape. And that's because you can see if I click inside of there, that allowed me to just extrude a hollow rectangle upwards. So if I had decided that maybe I wanted to click in the center, obviously I would just extrude the center part. But in this case, that would be the same as basically just placing a cube. So you guys can kind of see some of the advantages here. If I wanted to turn around and take a polyline and draw from this corner to this corner, and from that corner to that corner, now I could just extrude this shape. So you guys can see there's a lot of things that you can do with this program to be able to manipulate things in specific ways in order to obtain the shape that you ultimately want. The other thing that I can do is I can tweak faces. So maybe I don't like the face of this object much as the way it's, you know, facing or what, you know, what have you. So I can rotate, you know, the direction the object, and then now I've got a face that's facing the other direction. So, you know, it's almost more kind of starting to, yeah, interesting shape. So you guys can kind of see what, you know, how this program can be extremely useful, and not to mention the fact that it's free and it's as powerful as it is. You can pretty much do anything in this program that a regular CAD program can do. The only thing is with this program is that it can be a lot harder to do some of the things that, I don't know, Autodesk Inventor can do. Might be able to do a lot more complicated functions a lot easier, but for all intents and purposes, you can do the exact same things that you could do, or make the exact same shapes that you could make in Inventor in this program. There just might not be a lot of shortcuts, so you might have to come up with roundabout ways to make certain things happen. But for the most part, the whole purpose of this tutorial series is just to show you guys how to think outside of the box as far as how to use the different commands in 123D and manipulate them or massage them in order to create the shapes that you ultimately want for either 3D printing or woodworking or whatever. Obviously, we get the same thing with circles. We can draw little circles. So if I wanted to, for example, the next video, I'm going to show you guys how to make a simple project box. You could use circles to make spots for standoffs or whatever inside of a box, and give yourself room to put screws in. So if you made a cover for your box and you made the box, now you've got screws to be able to screw everything together and whatever else. It gives you a spot to screw everything together. So some of the other things we can do in here, you've got lines. So a polyline, for example, in this case, can be useful for making shapes that we don't have general shapes for. Like, say, for example, and here I have square, a circle, an ellipse, and a polygon. Those are pretty standard shapes. Polygons, for example, I can make any three-sided figure and larger with a polygon. I can make a three-sided, four-sided, five-sided, so on and so forth. But just because a polygon is a polygon, usually it's a regular shape. If you wanted to be able to create an irregular shape, I'm going to need to make use of a polyline. So what if I wanted to make a shape that looked, I don't know, maybe something like this, for example. And I don't know. So if I complete that shape and end that, now I got a different shape, which is something that I couldn't necessarily create with these standard sketches. Although, if you look at this, I could probably have taken a bunch of rectangles and put them together. So you guys can see there's a bunch of different ways to do the exact same thing, but some ways are simpler, some ways are more complicated, and but in the end, this is an extremely flexible program. And the whole point, like I said, of this series is just to open up your mind, give you ideas about how to be able to do things, because sketching in 3D can be extremely difficult for somebody if you haven't done it before and you want to get into it. That's what this series is supposed to be able to provide you help with. So we'll clear everything in the canvas here. I'll erase everything. Another quick function that we'll go through, we already kind of went through offsets, and trims will come in handy later. I guess I'll show you guys what that trimming. What do we want? Yeah, you know what? I'll show you guys a trim function. Why not? So we'll turn around. The trim function kind of works like this. Let's say I wanted to create an offsetted shape. So I offset it. I'll offset it by an 1/8 inch again, for example. And then I want to turn around and I want to be able to change, I don't know, some things here as far as, let's see, draw a line, and I want to be able to go from there to there. All right. And then, that wasn't a very good line. Let's try that again. From there to there, and from there to there, from there to there. So you guys can also, just another quick thing to realize, the grid will only snap to points that are, the grid will only snap to points like that are an inch apart, or in this case, yeah, I think I'm in inches. So these are all inches. It'll snap to each 0.2 of an inch, I believe, 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, no, it's 0.25 of an inch. So every 1/4 inch it'll snap on this axis here, and it will also snap to points of shapes. So you guys can see I have a point here. If I create points on shapes, I can have objects or lines or whatever be capable of actually snapping to them. And we'll cover that in a little bit further detail later. But let's go back up here to the trim function. And let's say, for example, I wanted to trim this shape. You guys can see how I was able to click on that shape and then trim it. And then now I've got a new kind of interesting looking triangle with crooked edges there. So trimming can come in handy if you need to erase lines that are and create a different shape than maybe you would, depending on the project you're doing, you might need to do something like that. So trimming provides you with a lot of options as far as being able to erase lines that aren't necessary, or etc. So let's see here. Anything else that we really want to cover? Yeah, we'll go over patterns real quick. So let's turn around and create a shape that maybe I would have to pattern. Let's say, for example, we'll go with like a standoff. So maybe I need some standoffs designed for something, I don't know. So I'll turn around, I'll start with 0.25 of an inch, and then I will turn around and I will offset that shape. And I'll offset it by 0.125 inches because I found that to be a nice round number as far as, yeah, of course, I probably made it a little too big. I actually probably wanted to offset it by 0.0625 because that would have made the walls 0.125 inches thick, which is actually a pretty good thickness for 3D printing. It actually makes sure that the object won't break easily. So anyways, that's good enough for our example here. We'll extrude this. I'll extrude this up by 1 inch. And now you guys can kind of see, if I come over here to grid, I'm going to come over here to grid visibility. And I'm going to hide the sketches temporarily so you can just see the shape. Now you guys can kind of see I got some kind of a standoff thing. So if I needed to replicate this, there's a very easy way to do that. I can turn around and I can actually, let's see here. No, that's not what I really... I guess the best way, the best way to create to replicate objects is just to copy them. So you click on the object and click Control C and then Control V to paste it, and then you can drag it along. And I can also then select these objects again, and then I can do this with multiple objects if I needed to be able to. There we go. So just like that, I've made four shapes, even though these two are kind of sunken between the grid or below the grid. But just like that, I made 4 standoffs that I can use now in a project box, or for example, anything else, maybe some kind of LCD bezel or something like that for some kind of LCD screen or whatever for electronics and such forth. But you guys can kind of see that some of the things that you can do as far as copying, how easy it can be to actually copy something. Before we exit the this tutorial here, we'll turn around and we'll go through and actually discuss everything on the side here, and then that'll sum up this video. And the next time we'll open and we will make a project box, and I will show you guys how to actually do stuff with the project box. So let's see here. We've got the pan option. Panning is pretty straightforward. It just allows you to move around the grid. So if I click the pan option and click on the screen, I can pan. The other thing I can do, this next one here is orbit. I can actually orbit just by right-clicking and doing that. But if you're not a fan of doing that and you want to just be able to orbit like this, you can orbit with the left click as well. So there's kind of 2 ways they give you as far as flexibility for being able to orbit. And you got the zoom option. If you need to zoom in really close on something, perhaps to manipulate an edge or a corner of a shape, you need to be able to get in really close. This zoom option gives you the ability to do that. So, and then I can kind of zoom back out. All right. Fit is, let's say I have, I don't know, a shape. I put a shape way over here. Fit is going to allow me to actually fit myself in on the shape. So if I get myself disoriented, perhaps I'm off, obviously in some other kind of weird whatever over here, and I need to be able to get back over to that shape very easily, all I've got to do is click the fit button and I go straight to it. This will, the way this fit option works is if I have another shape on the screen, it actually fits all of the objects to the screen. So you can see if I click fit, it's going to fit the screen, so I'm focusing on both objects. If I only want to focus on one object, I can always click on the object and click the hide button, and that will hide the object. And then when I click fit, there's only one shape on the screen, so it will fix itself to just that shape. So you guys can see that it makes it very easy. If you remember, if you're needing to work on just a shape, 123D makes it very easy to be able to just focus on specific parts. Just like in like 123D or other CAD programs, you have layers. This thing has something that's kind of like layers. Just being able to turn things on and off is a pretty handy feature. Materials and outlines, well, that stuff's just kind of, it's actually shows you what the objects are made of. Outlines, obviously, so if I just turn outlines on only, you can see the outline of just the shape, where the shape is at. But if I turn it materials and outlines on, or just materials only, now the outline is not visible and just the material. But if I turn both of them back on, which is what I want, I'll have both the materials and the outline. Let's see what else we got. Show solids, show meshes, show hide solids, meshes, show solids / meshes, so show sketches and hide sketches. So let's say, for example, I used this already to hide sketches. I can re-show any of the sketches that I think I already, oh, there it is right over there. So you guys can see that sketch reappeared. If I hide that sketch, it disappears. So that's the ability to being able to turn on and off sketches. If I had multiple sketches on the screen and I just wanted to turn one sketch off to focus on another sketch, I have to remember to actually click on that sketch and hide it. But in order for me to do that, I actually have to get closer to it. But you guys kind of get the idea. For shapes, you just click on the shape and you can hide the shape. Yeah, all of that good stuff. So let's see what else we got here. Grid visibility, if I want to turn the grid on or off, I don't know. I always like to have the grid on. Perhaps if you want to be able to visualize the piece without the grid interfering, so maybe you completed your drawing, then turning it off gives you the ability to kind of look it over from head to toe and look it all over, make sure everything's good. Usually I like to leave that on. Capture screenshot. You can capture a screenshot of the thing. Pretty self-explanatory. Grouping while snapping on and off. Grouping while snapping on and off. Yeah, you can group stuff, and then you can actually, so if you ever want to snap an object to something, which is this little magnet, which we'll talk about in a later video, maybe you don't want to be able to group while you're snapping, so you can turn that off, but I usually just leave it on. And then you got toggle snapping. So if you want to actually turn snapping off, you can actually turn it off there, and then you won't snap to anything. But if I turn it back on, then I will snap to things, and which is pretty much, I think, the best way to, I like snapping. So I like to leave that turned on. So anyways, I think that is everything that I'll show you. The one last thing I will show you is you can actually, if I wanted to click on a shape and change it into a different object, I don't know, maybe for whatever reason, this we'll change it into a yellow ball. But perhaps, like if I wanted to design something, some kind of, I don't know, like I said before, a table, and I want to show the screws, the wood, the whatever, maybe I want to change the color of stuff to give it distinguishing features, so I know that, okay, this is a screw in a bracket, this is a piece of wood, so whatever, you can use this materials option and kind of scroll through this to click on different things that you might want your objects to look like. So kind of opens up, gives you a little bit more options as far as how things are, how you want things to look, and how gives you a better idea of what it is you're trying to visualize. But if you use Autodesk usually for 3D printing, which is what I usually use it for, then honestly just leaving it as the default color is probably good enough for you. I don't think you really need it to be any other color. So, but anyways, I think that's all I have for you guys for this tutorial. As always, like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions or you would like to see a specific function of Autodesk or whatever, 123D, always just remember to leave a comment or send me a private message or something. Just say, hey, I have this object that I would like to see you design, and whatever else. And later in the series, we'll actually get into 3D printing, and I'll actually show you guys how you can 3D print or actually export these files as STLs and 3D print them. So anyways, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I will see you guys in the next video.